All right, so silk. What comes to mind? Probably this beautiful, luxurious fabric, right? But what if that single, delicate thread was actually a force of history, something that could build empires, connect whole continents, and literally shape culture? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today. We're going to unravel the incredible story of silk in Persian history.
Yeah, people often call it a thread of light that bridged civilizations. And it's such a perfect description, isn't it? You can just picture this one shimmering thread stretching all the way from China, right through the heart of Persia, and landing in the courts of Rome. But here's the thing, it was never just a trade route. It was a lifeline, a pipeline for culture and big ideas.
Okay, but here's the twist. The really interesting part. Everyone's heard of the Silk Road, right? But Persia's story with silk, it's way, way older than that famous road. I mean, we're talking long before it was ever a thing. So the real question is, how old are we talking? You might want to brace yourself because the answer is pretty wild.
So to find that answer, we actually have to get our hands dirty. We're going to have to dig, and I mean that literally. Our story doesn't start on a road, it starts in the ground, with clues that archaeologists have found. Clues that show silk in Iran thousands of years before anyone even thought of a Silk Road.
Okay, so check this out. In Shush, which was this ancient major city, archaeologists found actual natural silk fibers. And the date on them? We're talking 2500 to 3000 BC. Now let that sink in for a second. That is right around the same time that silk weaving was just getting started in China, its birthplace. And it's not a one-off thing either. Other sites, like Tepe Hasar and Yenik Tepe, show similar evidence. It tells us they were familiar with these kinds of amazing fabrics way back then.
I mean, just look at that timeline. How incredibly close are those first two dates? This is huge. It means Persia wasn't just some late adopter who jumped on the bandwagon. No way. Their history with silk is almost as old as the history of silk itself. And from these very first, ancient traces, silk was on a path to become a symbol of pure power, and later on, the engine of a massive industry.
So that's exactly where we're going next. Let's look at how silk went from being this super rare, almost mythical material to an absolute must-have for emperors and traders.
Fast forward to the Achaemenid Empire, around 500 BC. At this point, silk is the ultimate status symbol. If you're royalty, you're wearing silk. And we're not just guessing here. We have the receipts, literally. Clay tablets from the palace at Persepolis talk about these shiny and soft fabrics coming in from the east. This stuff wasn't for everybody, you know? This was strictly for the top brass, the king of kings.
Okay, and then a few centuries later, under the Parthians, things get even crazier. Persia basically has a stranglehold on the silk trade routes, and it is causing a major fuss over in Rome. And you have to hear this quote from the Roman historian Pliny the Elder. He's actually complaining that Persian silk makes Roman men soft and feminine. How great is that? It just shows you how powerful and desirable, and maybe even a little dangerous, this fabric seemed to the rest of the world.
So you can see this really important shift happening. Under the Achaemenids, it's all about internal power, right? Silk is a symbol of the king's grandeur. But then, under the Parthians, it explodes onto the world stage. It becomes this massive engine for trade and even diplomacy, connecting the great empires of the East and West. But believe it or not, the biggest change was still on the horizon. This brings us to what you can only call a revolution. We're talking about the Sassanian Empire and their golden age of silk.
See, the Sassanians weren't satisfied with just being middlemen. Oh no, they wanted to dominate the entire silk industry, and their game plan was absolutely genius. Step 1, lock down the trade routes. Step 2, get their hands on the secret to making silk, sericulture, farming silkworms. Step 3, use that secret to build huge production hubs. And finally, step 4, transform Iran from a simple trader into a global powerhouse, exporting their own finished silk.
And we're not talking about generic knockoffs here. Sassanian silk had its own unique, powerful style. The craftsmanship was just next level. They were weaving with gold and silver threads, creating these incredible fabrics with iconic Persian designs. You know, the mythical simmer bird, epic hunting scenes, lotus flowers. Cities like Nishapur and Shuster became famous all over the world for this stuff.
The impact was so huge, so lasting, that for centuries in medieval Europe, if you got your hands on any fine, luxurious fabric from the East, you just called it Persica, which literally means Persian fabric. I mean, just think about that for a second. The brand recognition was so strong that Persian became the shorthand for luxury. It was the best of the best. But As we've been saying, the story of the Silk Road was never really just about the silk. The real story, the one that changed the world, was about all the things you couldn't pack in a saddlebag.
Because traveling right alongside all those bales of precious fabric were, well, the building blocks of civilization. And with Iran sitting right at the crossroads, the Silk Road wasn't just a trade route, it became a superhighway for ideas.
Just try to picture it. You have merchants from China, India, Rome, all meeting up in these Persian inns or caravanserais. And what do you think they talked about? They weren't just haggling over prices. They were sharing everything. Art styles started to mix. Religions like Buddhism and Christianity found new followers. Scientific discoveries were passed along. Even alphabets and writing systems hitched a ride on those caravans.
And all of this leads us to what is, maybe, the most famous and lasting legacy of silk and Persian culture, the art of the carpet.
So here's a kind of philosophical question for you. How does a single fragile thread, something made by an insect, become immortal? How does it survive for centuries?
The answer is actually pretty simple, but it's also beautiful. It becomes immortal when it's woven into art. And in Persia, there was no better, no more incredible home for silk than the carpet.
You can see here how things really hit their peak during the Safavid era. This was the golden age of the Persian carpet. Weavers in famous cities like Kashan and Isfahan were creating absolute masterpieces. And these things weren't just rugs you'd throw on the floor. No, they were seen as woven gardens, images of paradise on earth, symbols of eternity itself. The silk carpet really became the ultimate expression of Persian art.
And really, this quote just sums it all up perfectly. When we think of Iran today, words like elegance, art, craftsmanship come to mind. And a huge part of that reputation comes right back to this one thread spun thousands of years ago. It's a thread that has literally woven the past and the present together.
So it kind of leaves you thinking, doesn't it? Everything around us, the clothes we wear, the things in our homes, it all has a hidden history. It makes you wonder, what other amazing stories about art and history and entire civilizations are woven into the fabric of our world, just waiting for us to find them?